Recording in progress.
You guys, if you wanted to sit down, you could take one chair. I'll have to be at a chair next to you because people hop in and out of the waiting room and stuff like that. And I need to do so hard. 2 chairs, so
If you don't mind us sitting next to you.
No,
okay.
no. We have
You
to
can
try
do the
to.
clicky too if you want.
Well, we have to try to social distance as best we can. So, but I still got to monitor people coming out of the waiting room and stuff like that. Okay. So. Okay.
Ready to start whenever you
Just a
are.
second. I'll introduce. Okay. Our next presentation for the symposium is entitled Conformity in the Online Environment. Our presenters are Bryana Dunnigan, Kayla Gilbert, Erin Holland, and Jerald Sims.
Do you want to let the 2 people in the waiting room first?
Yes. Mhm.
So, first of all, in order to understand our study, we need to ask the question, what is conformity and why do we study it? So the definition of conformity is a social influence involving change in a behavior or belief in order to fit in with the majority. As this is so, conformity has a very obvious influence on social norms, as social norms are activities and behaviors that the majority has deemed acceptable in society. In the current era, we really need to focus on the effects of COVID-19 on levels of conformity, because COVID-19 has driven people to have such a higher online presence. This has the possibility of increasing risky behaviors in the online environment. Especially so, we have Zoom and the revolutionization of the classroom experience through Zoom and online learning, which further increases the amount of people that have an online presence due to COVID-19. There are several factors of conformity that have to be studied and identified in order to further understand what conformity really is. So some factors of conformity are one's peers, the environment that one is in, the size of the group that one happens to be in at the time, the relationships one has with others, the unanimity of the group, or group cohesion, the nature of the task that one is performing, one's level of self-confidence, and the different facets of one's personality are also factors of conformity. And different personality factors are more specific to levels of conformity include things such as self-confidence, gender, introversion and extroversion, and anything like that. There are also some variables and factors specific to the online setting, such as if a person is interacting with people with their camera on or their camera off, or just how personable the interaction is with others online in general. So one of the background studies that we used for our literature was Winjanayaki et al., done in 2020. And in this study, subjects were given fabricated feedback about how participants in the majority, or they were given feedback about how participants in the majority and the minority answered to online questions. So essentially, when they gave their answer, they were told if their answer was in the majority of answers or if their answer was in the minority of answers. And because of the way that this was set up, the researchers found that participants conformed at least 78% of the time, and they were especially more likely to conform if they were unsure about the answers to the online quiz questions. And the personality factors of conscientiousness and neuroticism were related to higher levels of conformity, which is important because levels of conscientiousness and neuroticism are related to levels of introversion. Another study that we looked at was Ross in 2019. And in this study, there were 274 adult participants who took part in line comparison tasks, very similar to the ones used in the ASH conformity studies and in the line matching tasks that we used for our study as well. And for some of the line judgment tasks, subjects gave their answers with either incorrect or correct peer responses in a picture box. They were able to see whether or not what answers their peers were giving. And these researchers were primarily interested in levels of conformity and gender differences. So whether males or females conformed different to the incorrect or correct answers. And while they didn't find any gender differences, the study did suggest that distance or online conformity pressures may operate in a similar way that in-person pressures do, which is super important because we were also trying to mimic that in-person pressure in our own online study.
Some additional background information we had was Newman and et al. For 2018. And their quote from that is, "In the name of justice, how conformity processes in social media may influence the online vigilantism." These researchers showed that the number of Facebook text comments and the number of shares influenced whether the people would agree with vigilante behavior in the online environment. They also studied that subjects who could highly relate, emphasize, and identify with the commenters were also more likely to indicate that they would engage in vigilante behavior offline. And given the recent events at the Capitol on the 6th of January, more studies are needed to show how online influence affect behavior. Our background was Solomon Ash on the purpose of our study. The pressures of a unanimous majority against the one individual can create enough pressure to make a person conform, even if the task is unambiguous. Our study will use a similar line judgment protocol to investigate conformity. Pressure of an unanimous majority against one individual can create enough pressure to make a person conform even if the task is unambiguous. In our study, participants evaluated the lines after receiving a correct or incorrect feedback from the peers in the online Zoom setting. We also investigated how much participants would identify with their peers by varying whether they could see them, aka Zoom on or Zoom video off. The level of perceived personal control and introversion were also studied. Hypothesis is that it is anticipated there will be an effect of personal connection subjects completing the line judgment task with the Confederates that had had a video on with higher conformity scores than those who completed the line judgment task with Confederates who had their video off.
Recording in progress.
Our hypothesis related to the locus of control and the introvert scale included these three additional factors: powerful others, internal locus of control, and chance. Our hypothesis is that there will be a relationship between the three subscales of the perceived personal control scales that measure one's view of a powerful other's internal locus of control and chance, as well as the introvert score and level of conformity.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bryana, and I'll be presenting the method section. The participants for this study were undergraduate students from a small liberal arts university. 64 participants were gathered for this experiment, all from various demographics. They were all 18 years or older and of all genders. Exclusion of the study were those that did not attend Methodist University, as well as any persons that were under the age of 18. Extra credit was offered to participants enrolled in undergraduate psychology courses. Next. Continued. Pre-recorded videos with camera on video and camera off video. Videos included slides with 24 line orientated tasks modeled after ASH line tasks. And for our surveys, we used the Susan Cain adapted inventory and the Levinson multi-dimensional locus of control scale. And these were our line orientated task examples that we used for our experiment. Procedure. Initially, we gathered individuals to be Confederates and did pre-recording of the video on and off variables with Confederate answering incorrectly. We then recruited for our study insight classes. We scheduled Zoom meetings with those participants. Informed consent was sent to participants who volunteered before the study occurred and then requested to be sent back to us. When the participants entered the Zoom session, we introduced our study to them. Participant randomly placed into either camera off or camera on condition. Proper video with line orientated tasks was screen shared. Participants completed 24 trials of line orientation task. Participant gives answer to line orientation test after listening to the Confederates' answers. Participant were then given a link to the Susan Cain Adaptive Inventory Survey via Question Pro, and then they were given the Levinson Multidimensional Locus of Control Scale Survey via Question Pro as well. And then we debriefed them and thanked them for their time.
I'm not gonna sit down. All right, so as you see, these are our results right here. There's no significant difference between the conformity scores as the function whether it was on or the video was off. Next slide. Right here, you see the chart, which is a matrix of the video on and the video off. As you see, the mean is a 0.1017 for the video on, and for the video off, it is 0.536. Next slide. So the results you see right here are the results of, there was a significant correlation between introverts and the powerful others, which were our two variables, with the one factor being 0.308 and the p-value being 0.021. There was another significant correlation between the introversion and chance, which is 0.390, and the p-value being 0.003. The last correlation was between our chance and powerful others, which was 0.629, our p-value being over 0.001. Next slide. This right here is our correlation matrix where you see all our data. We're seeing all the conformity scores and all our variables. The discussion, partial support for our hypothesis were found. We found some intriguing results with the personality and personal control measures, but none of the conformity variable, my fault. The conformity variable did not come out because of the floor effect. We had the overall levels of conformity. We are non-conformities. Although the means were in the correct direction, we also had a small sample size. Next slide. Positively powerful others in chance. Suggested that introverts others, our lives are determined by chance. Since our studies focus on conformity, we use a brief introvert.
If you want it, you can get it. I'm not getting it. My mom would be mad. They're like very against it.
Any thank our presenters? They did an awesome job. Go Conformity group, good job. I'd like to now open the floor up. Does anybody have any questions or comments for our awesome presenters?
Thank you. We'd like to say thank you to Dr. Snyder and Emily Cooper for helping us with Question Pro and being our support system.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. Another round of applause for our awesome presenters. Give us a few minutes to reset our Zoom and we'll be ready for our last group.
Hello.
And if I could please ask the audience to mute your mics, please. Please mute your mics during the presentation. Please unmute and talk to us afterwards, but during it, we really appreciate your being muted. Okay, our last presentation for the day is called The Impact of Distraction on Online Learning Implemented Through Zoom as a Result of COVID-19. Our researchers are Logan Taylor, Gabriella Torgeson, and Jacqueline Young.
Okay, so due to the increase in coronavirus cases during the spring of 2020, many schools and universities ceased in-class learning and switched to a virtual format of learning to lessen the spread of the disease. As a result, this study will examine the variable of distraction over Zoom and the effect it has on verbal, emotional learning and memory recall. So our study utilized some background literature to provide more contextual evidence for our hypotheses. According to Besser, Flett, and Ziegler-Hill, as well as Matheson and Anisman, increased amounts of stress in online environments can negatively impact learning by decreasing a person's ability to truly intake information. This is supported by Gang's research in the negative impact distractions, which are forms of stressors, have on cognitive control, which is a person's ability to control what their focus is on. When our brain is trying to process distractions in addition to learning information, our cognitive control is split, which lessens the amount of control we have on our ability to focus. Pessoa also states that emotional stimuli impacts cognitive control, whereas negative emotional stimuli decreases effective cognitive control more than positive emotional stimuli. Additionally, Bambury, Meckin, Tremblay, and Jones, as well as Zemer and Foxtree, suggest that auditory distractions impair cognitive performance more than visual distractions due to their ability to break through selective attention more easily than visual distractions. So this study will utilize the effective auditory verbal learning as a present study. This measure was originally developed by Snyder and Harrison in 1997 and has been utilized in numerous studies. For instance, Comer, DeVore, Harrison, and Harrison looked at emotional learning in left and right CVA patients in 2017. It is an alternate version of the Ray auditory verbal learning test, and it utilizes a positive emotional measure and a negative emotional measure, with words from a positive word list such as happy and a negative word list such as grave. It also measures emotional and auditory verbal learning. Our summary hypothesis states that it is hypothesized that word recall will decrease in the presence of a noise distraction in a virtual learning environment. Additionally, it is predicted that there will be a difference in recall as a function of emotion. We also have several main effect hypotheses. A main effect of trial is anticipated, with recall being better for trial 4 and trial 5 compared to trial 1 and trial 2. A main effect of list location is anticipated as well, with recall being better for the first 5 words, or a primacy effect, and last 5 words, a recency effect. A main effect of list type is anticipated, with recall scores being different for subjects receiving the positive word list than the negative word list. A main effect of distraction is also anticipated, with total recall scores on trial 5 being greater for the group without the cell phone distraction compared to the group with the cell phone distraction. We also have two interactional hypotheses. It is anticipated that there will be an interaction between list type and distraction condition, with recall varying for subjects receiving the negative words with the cell phone distraction compared to the subjects receiving the positive words without the cell phone distraction. It is also anticipated that there will be an additional interaction between list type and distraction, utilizing the PANIS scores. It is anticipated that subjects receiving the negative list with distraction will have higher negative PANIS scores and lower positive PANIS scores than subjects receiving the positive list without distraction.
So, my name is Gabriella, and now I'm going to talk about the methodology part and section of our study. First up are the participants. We ran about 41 Methodist University students. They were all 18 years or older with various demographics, and they all had to sign a consent form to participate before we could even run our study. And there was also extra credit offered based on individual professors. So the materials we used for our study was the effective auditory verbal learning test. We also used a computer, a word processor, and an email. Being in a pandemic, everything online, we use Zoom like we are today, which is a video conferencing platform. We also used an auditory distraction recording and the PANIS scale. So our procedure follows as this. We determined a Zoom meeting time. Next, we would introduce our study to the subjects and have them sign an informed consent. Then we would randomly assign a subject to either the negative or positive word list, and then we would adjust the volume accordingly, and then we would begin trial 1. Female subjects listened to a pre-recording of a female reading the words, and the male subjects listened to a pre-recording of a male reading the words. The next step was the trial 1 instructions, which was a pre-recording video that we would play, and it would play like this. I'm going to play you a list of words. Please listen carefully. When I stop, you are to say as many words as you can remember. When I stop, you are to say as many words as you can remember in any order that you recall them. Just try to remember as many as you can. And then the recording of the 15 words would play, and then the researcher would stop the recording, and the subject would recall as many words as they could remember, and then they would begin trial 2. Same thing, trial 2 instructions would read, now I'm going to read the same list again. When I stop again, I want you to say as many words as you can remember, including words you said the first time. It doesn't matter what order you say them, just say as many words as you can remember, whether or not you said them before. The recording of the 15 words would play, the researcher would stop the recording, the subject would recall which words they remembered, and this would continue on through trials 3 through 5, and then follow the steps 7 through 9. The main crucial part of our study was the subjects would be randomly assigned to a distraction group, which they heard a recording of an Apple iPhone default ringtone during recall on trial 2 and trial 4. The researchers would play the recording via their phones at the word call and stop before beginning trial 3 and trial 5. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jacqueline to discuss the results.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jacqueline, and I will be presenting the results portion of our research. So we did a distraction by list type by trial by location, a 2x2 by 5 by 3 mixed factorial ANOVA with repeated measures on trial location, which was performed on the recall scores. No interactions were found. However, there were several significant main effects. As you can see by our results, the factors of distraction, location, trial, and list show substantial evidence against the null hypothesis. As you can see by the mean of our type, there was a significant difference between the two lists. Our list 1 was positive words and our list 2 were negative words. This chart shows that there was a better recall for the negative words. As you can see by our chart of distraction, there was a significant difference between the means of chart 1 and chart 2. Chart one shows the non-distracted participants, and chart 2 shows the distracted participants. There was a better recall for participants who were not distracted. Next, we have our significant effect of location. As you can see by the mean of our results, there was a significant difference in locations. Location 3 had a better recall, which shows that there was a recency effect. Next, we have the chart that shows our trials. As you can see, there is a difference and an increase in the means per trial. Trial 5 participants had a better recall in trial 5. This shows a learning curve. With that conclusion of our results, I would like to begin our discussion. The significant effects of list, distraction, location, and trial provided support for our hypothesis. Our findings are useful for educators and students to understand so that they can work on ways to eliminate distractions in their environment, such as turning off the TVs or putting away our cell phones. Additionally, because the subjects recall differed between positive and negative lists, it suggested that emotions does impact learning. Because our research was limited to Methodist University students, future researchers should seek to include different populations of people. Researchers can also build upon findings by conducting the study in different learning environments, such as in person or in group settings. At this time, I would like to address any questions or comments or concerns.
I would like to open the floor up to anyone who has a question or concern for our awesome researchers.
If there's no questions or concerns, thank you for having us.
Thank you for your time. We hope you enjoy the rest of your symposium. Have a good one, everyone.